Because I forgot to do it earlier, I'm going to have to throw this at the beginning of the video before even my intro. Spoilers for every campaign. Spoilers. Spoilers. Hello and welcome to my channel. I am Zodiac Bandit, and today we have a video I've been thinking about for a very long time, and that is what would happen if the Bell's Hells were to fail against Ludinus and Predathos, and other members from previous campaigns would have to rise up and sort of join the surviving members or the remaining members of the Bell's Hells. Now I have two sort of ideas for this one, and that is a story-based one, which characters from previous campaigns would make the most sense to join in, and which characters do I think makes the most sense to survive in the Bell's Hells, and max of 7, one for each player. I'm not going to have like Grog and Ford be on the same team. That doesn't make any sense. And then the other team is going to be what is the most overpowered, unkillable team that I can come up with doing the same thing. Only 7 players, 7 characters, and only 1 per character or player. So yeah, let's get into it. Starting with the story-based characters, what team I think would make the most sense of a story-based sort of thing. And I'm going to start with the Bell's Hells. I feel like that only makes sense. The only surviving members of the Bell's Hells in this idea is Imogen and CG. I feel like those two characters have a lot of tie-ins to a lot of the ancient history to this. Obviously, Imogen is directly tied to Predathos, and CG is directly tied to Aor, and I think that sort of connection with Ludinus and Aor in ancient times and Calamity is very interesting. Not to mention, as far as character stuff goes, Imogen losing Laudna would be huge, and CG losing Ashton would be insanely massive as well, and it would give these two characters a massive drive, especially because a lot of them have built a lot of good relationships with the other characters. So if these two were to lose everyone else, I feel like they would have the biggest impact. I don't feel like if Orym or if Chetney were to be the last one surviving, they would have as big of an impact. They've already lost a lot of things. So for them to be the last one standing, being Imogen and CG, I feel like they have the biggest impact here if they're still around. Meanwhile, losing other characters enforces these guys to sort of keep moving forward and eventually achieve their goals and join up with the rest. Next, we have Bo and Caleb. They're going to be the next ones joining this story-based team. And the reason is because they have a lot of stuff to do with Ludinus still. Now, why Bo instead of Keyleth? I think if the Bell's Hells are going to be in such a situation to where they get wiped out in the way that I'm suggesting they do, I think Keyleth is likely going to die before them. Her dying is going to be like a sort of indicator of how hard this is going to get. And we damn well know that the Ruby Vanguard is capable of nearly killing her, if not killing her outright. So I think Bo and Caleb make more sense, especially because Vax is in a certain situation right now. Keyleth is dead, and I would suggest that Laudna and Orym both die. So Caleb and Bo are realistically the only ones left that they can play as, and they have a connection to Ludinus. I just think that story-wise, these two make a metric fuck ton of sense. The next person to join the group will be Ford. I do think his connection to the gods is what mainly keys him into being in this spot. Out of all of Travis's characters, especially because I've already insinuated that Chetney is probably dead, and I don't think Grog has quite the strong connection outside of, like I mentioned earlier, potentially Keyleth dying, but there is no true connection for Grog and any of the gods, realistically, so I don't think he would join in. Ford is the only one who has any sort of connection with the gods, who I truly believe would step in this sort of situation. We've already seen him step in to fight gods in the past, mainly Uk'otoa, and I don't think it's too far out of the reach to say that he would easily be the one to say, hey, I'll join Bo and Caleb. You guys stay here, do your own things, mainly talking to Jester here in this situation. So I do think that it makes a lot more sense for Ford out of anyone else in this group to sort of step up and be like, hey, I'll join these two. You guys just sit back. The first member of Vox Machina joining this group is Pike, and the single reason that I put her here over any other Ashley Johnson characters is because I think she has the best connection to any gods, and we need more god-faring characters in this saving gods story, which is likely what's going to happen if Predathos gets on the loose. They have to now save a bunch of gods. Every other character in Vox Machina realistically doesn't have a true connection to a god, with the exception of Vax, but we know where Vax is. Percy has a mild one as well to the Raven Queen, but everyone else in the group seemingly just had a connection to the gods so they could take on Vecna. This character does not have this situation going on. She's been with Saren Ray basically from the beginning of ever for the character, so realistically, her being connected to a god puts her in the best position as a Ashley Johnson character, with the exception of obviously Fern, who is a Rudis born, but she is so mildly Rudis born that it's not even funny. So I don't think that's a true connection over that, like, sort of overpowers Pike here. I think Pike is a better fit for Ashley in this scenario. And lastly, from Vox Machina joining this group is Percival DeRollo. I think he is the best fit for many, 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 many reasons. First and foremost, like I mentioned earlier, if Keyleth dies, Percy's going on a fucking warpath. Of everyone else in the Vox Machina crew, Percy is the one who's deeply connected to her outside of Vax. So I think that Percy would absolutely go into a rage and just start opening No Mercy Percy up. And I do think this is also the reason that Vex wouldn't be joining the group, not only because Imogen's still alive and there's only one character per player, but I think he would tell Vex to stay behind and sort of rule Whitestone and take care of the kids while he goes and does this thing. And I do think another thing that would worry him quite a bit is if he heard Laudna died, that means the potential return of Delilah is very real. And he would want to step up, much like he did nearly step up and get rid of her in Campaign 3. So I think that thing of Keyleth dying and the sort of connection to Delilah would definitely pull Percy into this group. And there you go. This is the storytelling group. We have Imogen, FCG, Bo, Caleb, Ford, Pike, and Percy. I think this is a very, very good group and has a lot of good connection to gods, villains of the campaign already, and sort of other characters who we've seen in Campaign 3. So yeah, I definitely think this is a solid group. I do feel the need to clarify why certain members of each group wouldn't join. I'm going to start with Vox Machina here. Most members of Vox Machina don't have a true connection to any gods or to any of the villains in the campaign, that is Campaign 3. So for me, in my opinion, I don't think it makes much sense, not to mention some characters are either already involved, like Keyleth is, and I think that if she were to sort of have this situation happen, she would die. And then Vax is obviously where Vax is, so I'm not going to sort of be like, oh, he's going to suddenly join the group, because right now he can't. Same thing goes with a lot of other characters. I just don't think they have connections to gods or any of the villains. That's why Scanlan wouldn't be pulled in. That's why Grog wouldn't be pulled in. And I think that's a fair assumption to make in this situation. Terry, I could see potentially getting pulled in for one reason or another. He's in Wild Mountain. He does have a mild, super mild connection to lewdness in that sense. But I very, 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 very much doubt that would be enough to pull in Terry. So, just putting that out there. Moving on to why certain members of the Mighty Nine wouldn't hear, mainly Caduceus and Jester. I think Ford would tell Jester, hey, go with Artagan to another realm, be safe, and that sort of thing would happen. I think at this point, if I'm going to make a very, very, very bold prediction here, I think they might have a kid on the way or already have a kid. So with that bold prediction, I think that's a good reason for, Jester not to come back. Also, I think that Veth at this point is firmly within retirement, standards, and would rather just sort of stay at home. Even with this looming threat, she would probably want to spend the potential last days with her family, and I think that's totally fair. As far as Yasha goes, I see no reason for her not to join. She has a very strong connection with gods. She has a strong connection with Bo. However, I just feel like Pike makes a little bit more sense with her connection to Saren Ray, a much stronger connection to Saren Ray than Yasha potentially does with the Stormlord. So that's the reasons for the Mighty Nine characters. There is one more. Caduceus, Clay. Realistically, I just think he's also in that retirement sector of not wanting to sort of get involved and sort of letting things play out how they go at this point. He does, in my opinion, if he really wanted to have a connection to a lot of stuff that's going on, potentially Malleus Mir being a big thing for him, with lewdness potentially being some sort of involvement in that, and then obviously with his connection to the Wild Mother, he could also want to join using that. I just think it makes a lot more sense for Percy to be the character for him to play with the whole Delilah thing, and with Keyleth being potentially gone, so I just think that makes the most sense there. Now, with why I picked certain characters for the Bell's Hells to be gone, like I said earlier, I think Imogen and FCG are the ones who, in my opinion, have the deepest connections to certain characters and certain lore bits. Literally, with Imogen being Predathos, one of Predathos's sort of people that she's connected to, and then FCG with the connection to Calamity and Aor, I think just makes a lot more sense as well than a lot of other characters. Chetney, Orem, to me, feel like characters who would be the first ones to go. They would protect everyone else and sort of let them die first. Ashton is also in that lineup, and I think Laudna would 100% sacrifice herself to sort of protect Imogen in some way. And I also think Fern would be a character to sort of let others survive first and let them get out. So as far as those characters go, I just feel like Imogen and FCG make the most sense to be the last ones remaining, and they have the deepest connection to the overall story or villains in the campaign. So yeah, that's just my thinking for that. Now it's time to move on to the Overpowered team, and I'm just going to rip through the team and then go over why I picked them all. Starting with Vox Machina, we have Keyleth and Grog. Moving on to the Mighty Nine, we have Caleb, Yasha, Caduceus, and Jester. And for the Bell's Hells, we have FCG. So the reason I picked these characters, let's start with Keyleth. Moon Druid is disgusting. Moon Druid is absolutely destructive, and they can never die. They have insane health pools. They can hit like a fucking truck. They can turn into elementals, and if they choose not to turn into an elemental, they can just pick two very beefy, very strong wild shapes and just sit there forever. I think they can fly sooner than most other druid types as well, so they're just nasty. Moon Druid is just disgusting and is so good, and I don't know why you would never pick an elemental, but that's an option. But like I said, health pool out the ass. They're insane. I'm pretty sure they can also heal while they're in their wild shape. So just overall disgusting class. Then I'm going to go to Caleb next. Just a wizard is such a useful tool. To have a wizard who can just blast things, who can counterspell things, and is just disgusting from, long range and can be protected by other characters is so massive. And just having him around would be a nightmare for realistically anything they have to fight. Moving on to the Barbarians, Grog and Yasha. I feel like Barbarian is pretty self-explanatory as to why I think that would be overpowered to have. They can hit a million times in a turn, especially Grog, who has part fighter in him. They resist a ton of damage, slashing, piercing, and bludgeoning damage at the very least. They get resisted to, so they basically have a double health pool against that kind of shit. And it doesn't matter if that damage is magical or not. They just resist that type of damage anyway. Realistically, they're just disgusting. And Yasha even more so, because once she hits 0, she can still stay up for at least one more turn and just keep fighting as long as she doesn't get hit more than one time in the next, round coming up. She's disgusting and she's able to keep herself moving. And yeah, just very good. And then obviously having 3 clerics, I feel like is insane overkill. But I do feel like if you're making an overpowered thing, having more than one cleric is simply what you need. Not to mention, here's the play that I sort of came up in my head. Keyleth, Grog, and Yasha all begin to run forward. You get Jester and FCG to summon spiritual weapons. Caduceus puts up spiritual guardians. The spiritual weapons move up with Grog, Keyleth, and Yasha. The clerics and Caleb stay back. Caleb stays inside the spiritual weapon sphere. And then the next turn happens. Jester also casts spiritual guardians. And now there's just an impregnable wall surrounding Caleb. So Caleb is never going to be in any danger. And if there is danger, Caduceus or Jester just smacks the shit out of them. Same with FCG. So realistically, Caleb becomes untouchable with the exception of range spells, but if something comes at him, he can just counterspell it. So I just find this to be disgusting. You have 3 incredibly beefy characters running forward. You have 3 healers waiting to heal those beefy characters in the back, and they're also pulling double time by protecting their massive damage wizard, and the massive damage wizard is throwing fireballs or walls of fire at everything. I think this combo is disgusting. I think this is just destructive. And if this is what was fighting Predathos, I see 2 turns max for Predathos. That's a joke. I see a handful of turns, but I do think these guys come out pretty well unscathed against Predathos. So yeah, that is the Overpowered team. So there you have it, my 2 theoretical teams, one story-based and one overpowered. Which one do I like better? The story-based one. I would much prefer a weaker team that's a lot more story-focused than an overpowered, disgusting team, because, if you think like me, what I just described in the overpowered team would be the only type of fight you ever see. So I like the other team a little bit more. I just think the other one is really disgusting and really gross sounding and would be kind of cool to see once or twice. But yeah, overall, I had a lot of fun sort of like thinking up which character makes the most sense for each player, and I didn't put like too many limitations on myself with the exception of 1 player per character. 1 character per player. Jeez. But yeah, that was basically the only restriction I had on top of all of this. I just overall thought it would be a lot more fun to do it that way, as opposed to saying like you can't have multiple clerics, but they had multiple clerics in campaign 2, so that didn't make any sense to me to say you can't have multiple clerics. And not to mention in campaign 3 there's multiple rogues, even though they are just subclasses or multi-classes, and there's multiple sorcerers, so realistically that is a non-factor in this conversation. But with all that being said, I'm going to end the video here. Let me know what you guys think is the overpowered team and what is the best team story-wise for, if this scenario were to play out, in the comment section down below. Yeah. And with that, I will see you guys on Friday for the recap of whatever episode it is. I think it's 74. So until then, see ya.